hello to everyone. A very warm welcome. I am Nicole Dunn, so I'm the Head of Product, Internal Control and Business Process here at Pluxee UK. Thanks very much for joining me and my very special guests from Santander UK. So this is the first in a series of webinars from Pluxee following International Women's Day. So the 2024 theme was around inspiring inclusion, and we focused our discussions and activities around women in technology. Why technology? Well, we very much live in a digital age. Technology is here to stay. It's a sector that continually shapes and revolutionises our world. It's essential to innovation and economic growth, but it's a sector that's been dominated by men, historically an area that women have been underrepresented. And today we're planning to explore women's involvement in STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we're going to share some of our personal experiences, some hurdles that we face, what strategies that we've used to overcome them, and really delving into the critical role of mentorship and how that can help to empower women to thrive in STEM careers. So without further ado, I'm super excited to introduce to you my guests. Two hugely inspiring trailblazers in the tech sector. So Ruth Wood-Durson, who is the CIO of Fraud, and Ajit Kaur Sucha, who is the Business Support Manager for the Chief Information Office. Welcome to you both. Firstly, thank you so much for giving up your time and also your passion and commitment to be part of this. So we had some conversations before this. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Real privilege to be here. So thank you. And it's nice to see that we had technology issues in a technology webinar. So
the irony, isn't it, behind that? So it was inevitable. I am hoping that we'll have some time for questions at the end. So if assuming we don't get carried away on our discussions, please use the chat. We'll open up if we can at the end. So shall we dive straight into who you are, what do you do, and was technology a choice, or was it by chance that you ended up in this path?
So I'll start. Lovely to meet you all, and thank you for the invite. So I've worked in technology for 27 years, but it certainly wasn't by design. I actually went to university to become a primary school teacher. And often when I look at those similarities, there are many when you lead a team. There are many traits that I think probably from my teaching career that I bring into the office. But I think the biggest misnomer that we need to start breaking is that working in technology doesn't necessarily mean that you want to sit behind a computer and code, but it also doesn't mean that you can't want that. I think technology is so much broader and richer and deeper than people perhaps imagine or believe that they can be involved in that arena. And so my career has taken many twists and turns, but I feel suitably blessed to run the technology team here at Santander for the fraud team, where we have a team of 180 technical resources of all different disciplines working on customer products and colleague products to make sure that we protect the organisation and our customers from the impacts of fraud. So we have engineers and people who will have taken a very purist discipline down the engineering route, coding, maths degrees, but we've also got people who are really good with analytical thought processes and do the business analysis and understand customer journeys. And then we have people that do the testing and so have to be able to manipulate the code and understand different journeys. And then, of course, that wraps around that, you have to have people managers, and you have to have people managers that know how to grow those strong teams and thread them all together. So it's a wide range of roles and skills that sit within the technology team, but we fundamentally are the keys to the castle from an organisation perspective, because if you are a mobile user or a digital user in any fashion wanting to do your banking transactions, fraud underpins all of that. So I think any message that I'd like to get across is that don't be ever afraid of technology. It is fast growing, it's fast paced, it's innovative, and sometimes it runs quicker than maybe our minds can keep up with. But I think COVID made us realise that digital is at the centre of everything that we do, and how quickly society has now pivoted away from kind of some of the traditional norms of the way we want to do, whether it's banking, whether it's shopping, interacting with friends, etc. Look at us today, you know, years ago this would have been in a meeting room, and now we're hybrid and on a Teams call. So I think technology is an enabler, but it still needs people behind that technology to make sure that we do the right things. And you can add to that.
Sorry, Nicole. Did I interrupt you there?
No, I was just going to introduce you, because I think what was so nice for me was that when we first spoke, Ruth, your immediate response was, "I have the perfect person to support this." Where, not to embarrass you, Ajit, but just again where, you know, that different perspective, bringing in talent to the various different platforms, and you know, I think it really embodied the spirit of kind of what we were trying to do today. So, and the story, Ajit, I'll let you tell it, but it was really lovely to hear kind of how you became involved, particularly within Santander, and how you got involved there.
Thanks, Nicole. Gosh, no pressure.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me today, and thank you, Ruth, for suggesting me too. I'm honestly delighted to be here. But I think, Ruth, you touched on this when you mentioned that, you know, working in technology, it doesn't have to mean being the coder. It could, but it doesn't have to be that. And when I first started looking at sort of post-university career options, I didn't know that I would even have a place in a technology team, to be honest. I studied philosophy and then later studied social environment and things like that. So my background is not in technology, but I then started off, I guess, in a small business environment. And when you're in a small business, you do end up just wearing so many hats. I mean, my job title was something like commercial business manager, but it was really irrelevant. I'd met a founder of a business when he had just an idea to start a media agency, and later on, as we started building that out, he then wanted to build apps as well. So I just found myself in what was a tech company, I guess, and I was the only member of staff when we had started that, and it was one of my first ever jobs. And my perspective is honestly that I'm just addicted to learning. If I can learn something new, then you've got my motivation. So that just really, really encouraged me to get involved in tech. And I actually wanted to find out a little bit more about what the technology landscape looked like. So I joined various like networking groups in Milton Keynes. I joined a Google networking group as well. They had like professionals come in and give talks, and these are free communities that you can find. And even LinkedIn was a great help too. So I just kind of like dove into the tech arena to see where my place was. And that's where I actually learned there's so many roles, like portfolio managers and people managers, as Ruth said. There's actually the part of technology where you have to connect all the infrastructure technology to the end user and the customer, and also explaining it to them in a way that's not, you know, deeply technical. It's not all this jargon. It actually makes sense, and they can see how using it is going to enrich their lives. So I really, really enjoyed that. And I think that gave me a bit of encouragement to find my place. So slowly, I started getting a little bit more intertwined with technology. And I was at that company for about 3 years, and it was great. I learned so many different things. But we were actually based in like a co-working space, I'd say. So there was lots of other businesses in there. There was also an event space in there. And honestly, one morning I just happened to be going down to get my green tea as usual. And I saw these Santander banners and a load of ladies from Santander. And I want to call it being inquisitive, but honestly, it was probably just a bit nosy. I asked, you know, what's going on, what's happening today, and they just told me it's International Women's Day, so this was last March, and they were doing like a talk with their head of digital and also one of the non-executive board members or directors. I can't remember exactly who, but they had a bit of a panel discussion, a talk, sharing some knowledge and career paths and things like that. And I just asked, I was like, can I sit in and listen? Basically, and they're like, yeah, of course, grab a notebook, grab a free water bottle, which I've still got, and they say come in and have a listen. And it was great listening to these incredible female leaders talk about their journeys, and you just realize that that could be you. It's not, you know, you're not as distanced from it as you might think. And afterwards, I put my networking hat on, got talking, and then one of the ladies from HR was in the room, and she said, "Look, I think you'd be really good for this role." She later sent me the role on LinkedIn. I applied, got interviewed by Ruth, and here I am, and I'm loving the role. So I do think sometimes reason, obviously I'm not going to become like an astronaut overnight, but I do think if you apply yourself and you have that motivation, then there's lots of things you can learn, so just taking yourself out of that comfort zone. So that's kind of how I ended up here, which is a bit of an unconventional way.
It was, but I think the thread that feeds through all of that is that it was the characteristics that in this particular example that Ajit held, and it was less about, you know, maybe her experience or what she didn't know, because you can train skill, but someone's aptitude is something that they own and is unique to them. And if you can find that rough diamond that, you know, with the right support, networking, coaching, mentoring, but also experience and exposure, then all of a sudden those traits come out to play. And that's why your learning curve and your path has to be unique to you. And I think it's a really valid point about don't shut anything off, and just always be open to exploring, but take with you the core values that you hold as a person. Because as a recruiting manager, you know, when I'm looking to fill my team, that's exactly what I'm looking for, is those characteristics. So you don't necessarily need to be the best in technology or, you know, have that degree that kind of finites those things. It's actually your core values as a person that perhaps we're looking for more so.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in there as well, isn't there? Because there's, and we'll dive into this in a little bit, the importance of networking and using those channels that you have available to you, but also that sometimes those biases can start with ourselves, you know, believing that we can do those roles, where, you know, quite often there might be an assumption that women can't do tech, but sometimes it's that self-efficacy in terms of self-belief that I might not be the most technical person in the room, but actually I still have skills that will add value to the role, to the business, to the teams in which we're working in. So I think sometimes just believing that you can do something, you know, helps to sort of overcome some of those biases as well. I think sometimes they're just self-ingrained in terms of who we are. So it was so lovely to hear that, you know, that almost courageousness, you know, in terms of having the confidence to put yourself out there, to be inquisitive, to ask the right questions, it has put you where you are today. So I think thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I think just knowing that sometimes doors open and they don't always open in the direction we're expecting them to, and that's okay. And I think society has created this vision that we can't ever make mistakes, or we can't try something and it not work. And so we're always looking for that path to utopia, but that doesn't really exist. And I think about my own career journey, and lots of it were based on decisions perhaps in my personal life rather than perhaps my professional life. But I don't think I would have been ready for some of the things that have come my way if I hadn't have been in the position that I was at that time. So I think it's also about trusting a little bit in the time and being in the right place at the right time. And it's okay if that doesn't work out. You will find another way through. And that desire and that passion and that kind of what sits within your soul is often what will drive you to the next right decision. And I interviewed a lot of people before Ajit. So there were a lot of people that perhaps on paper may well have been more experienced, had more commercial, you know, experience, had worked for maybe a bank or had much more kind of understanding of technology from that scale, but they didn't maybe have the other part of the puzzle that I was looking for. So also know, like you say, that sometimes we sit with those own biases within ourselves. And we've got to be honest, women aren't visible enough yet in lots of the kind of more niche sectors, and we're not visible enough in some of the senior leaders and roles. And that's what we've got to break. And if that takes women in STEM, if that takes Women Internationals Day, if that takes a crowd of women coming together, so be it. Because the day we've succeeded is when we don't have to have those forced, you know, events happening, where actually it just happens by nature. but we're on that path, but we're not there yet. And so we need to celebrate the fact that there are these communities for us to be part of, not to be ashamed of them or feel like, oh gosh, it just feels like a group of gaggling women, but actually celebrate all the different stories and journeys that we've all got, within our own kind of suitcase.
And that's why I think there's just so much power to sharing stories. I mean, especially when you've got, women that have got to a level that you might not even think is possible to share their story and how they got there. I mean, I was speaking to one of the ladies on the leadership for the CIO this morning, and she was telling me she doesn't even have a background in technology. She doesn't even have those typical tech qualifications that you might think are so critical to be where she is now. And she heads up like fin crime, enterprise services, all those kind of areas. And I did not know that she would be able to get there without that tech background. So it's really, really encouraging. And I think being able to share those stories a lot more often, it does drive and motivate the next lot of women coming through as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the importance of role models as well, kind of having that to aspire to. And so we've touched a little bit on the lack of representation within sort of the technology sector, but and it's getting better, that it's improving. But in terms of some of the stats then, so women hold around 26% of tech-related jobs, and of that, 25% are leadership positions. And then it reduces again when you start to look at that software engineering side of things, which is currently sat around 14%. So just talking about that lack of representation there, do you think that there is an impact on women looking at a career in technology when there are so few role models, where women can almost identify that career path or career progression and visualize themselves in leadership roles? Do you think that has a big
I really
impact?
do. I think we're making a huge mistake that we don't get into our school age children at the right age.
Definitely.
We kind of start talking to children that are doing their GCSEs or A levels at that point, but by then they've already made their decisions. They've already had probably those social constructs embedded in their minds and cemented of what is a female role, what's a male role, what they can or can't do. We need to start much earlier in that process. We need to get people excited. We had a group of school children come in, and don't get me wrong, it was chaotic and noisy and made me thankful that I wasn't a primary school teacher, but they were like between 5 and 7, and we had them making bracelets where they had to make their name on a bracelet, but using code and binary coding. You're introducing something that's very technical, but in a fun and interesting way. And the buzz in the room was amazing. And then others were doing kind of decoding of patterns. That's technology, but it's just technology, positioned at a place where someone young can understand that. And if you get their thirst and their hunger at that stage, then you start to get that pipe. And for me personally, that pipe has been really dry. And so as I've started to navigate my own career, and I've kind of looked up and further and ahead and thought, yes, I'd like that, and I believe I can do it, there isn't anyone like me there. And that's really tricky. And that isn't to say that you need a group of women just to be successful, but you need to feel like you're seen and you're visible, and that people share the same kind of feelings and thoughts that maybe you do. And that can come from men and women, but it's quite disarming to walk into a board meeting and to be the only female there. And I think you end up then taking on the persona of a potentially a male to feel like you fit in. And that is what we do in life. We look for friends that make us feel good about ourselves. We go to places where we feel like, there's people who share the same values. And so the pipe has to be full and rich and running really, really smoothly to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future. But I absolutely think that if I did local school interviews a while ago, and the only people that were interested in those conversations were some of the boys that were doing engineering degrees or maths, because they also see it in a monetary fashion, that working in technology gives you money. So there's kind of their relation is all around the money. But I think if we were able to get in much younger, then we would see, a much stronger pipe. I mean, I'm not going to call her out, but one of my engineers is on this call today, and I can see her little icon. And for me, she will be a trailblazer of the future, because we don't have many engineers in the team. She's a developer. She's come through a scheme that kind of gives you exposure and experience into the world of work, whilst we're kind of testing that, you know, that process. And she's excelling because she's different, and she's different because there aren't many of her, and people will look to that and think, I can do that. What she's doing is really cool and it's really interesting. And so we need more of that. I don't want to just look on this screen and go, I can point out one person who's doing that role. I want to see, you know, a raft of it. So it definitely has an impact, and we definitely have lots to do, but I think we've got to start much sooner in the journey. At the moment, I feel like we're just kind of tackling the women that are experiencing it right here, right now, but not thinking about the future state.
Definitely. I mean, I totally agree that you know, being able to look much earlier, and hopefully we'll get a chance to show one of the videos that we were looking at, in terms of the importance of perception at that age, and how important that, you know, between 5 and 7 is that decision point where children are deciding what their career paths might look like, and what they naturally think, you know, just around the sort of toys that they're given to play with and things like that, so that girls are not typically given science related toys and things like that, but it all starts to build that sort of picture in terms of what career they will see themselves in. And I do think those role models are so important to that as well, and the more we get around that, sort of the easier, I guess, that will become, the more natural it becomes in terms of who will perform those roles. Does it give you a sense of responsibility within your remit? Because I certainly feel that is that you have that responsibility towards encouraging the next generation of female talent, particularly within those sort of leadership positions. What's your motivator? Where's your driving force there?
So actually, for me, I think my motivator, I mean, I've got 3 children, and you would assume that it would be my daughter that I want to do this for, but actually it's for my sons, because I want our world to be inclusive of everybody. And actually, I think we have to tackle making sure that our children, and actually, you know, perhaps our male children, understand that women have a place. I think the other problem that we have is that if you are a female that perhaps thinks that one day you'd like to have a family of your own, you tend to narrow your choices of career because you're assuming that you're going to take some time out. And I don't think we do much to encourage them women back into the workplace. And then there's always that kind of concept of, oh, you're part-time because you have children. And I think the world is changing, and certainly, you know, I know your husband and my husband have been very actively involved in bringing up our children. We bring up our children together, and so we've got to move away from the gentleman work and the woman kind of stays at home or makes different career choices. This is about making sure that we allow people to have choice and flexibility. So for me, my motivation comes from, I have to leave a better legacy than what I had. And actually, I can see the power of when you have the right people, regardless of gender, in the right roles, doing something that they love, then magic can happen. And so I don't want it to be this, constant rhetoric that we only look after the females. We need to look after everybody, and we need talent to be across the board. But my motivation for me is my 2 boys, because I want them to see their mum and know that she made changes to the way that perhaps they will benefit from, and the people that they go on to have in their lives.
No.
That's really, really important. I think, like, I've been in a bit of a unique position where I feel like I've been really blessed with some amazing mentors, sponsors. Within my network, honestly, both men and women have really invested their time in me, and, you know, at all different levels of experience. They've really shared and given advice where I've needed it, or guidance, or tips and tricks, or even just mistakes that they've made that maybe I can learn from. So I do feel like such a strong duty to now do that for the next lot. And I know that within however long I've been working now, since uni, 7 years, within that time, I wouldn't be able to have got to this position without that investment from those people. So I think it's so key. And it's not always the case that you need to, find a mentor and it's a formal relationship and you meet up with them once a month to go through specific agenda items. It can just be like a quick coffee. I mean, some of the great conversations you've given me advice loads, and it's not been like a formal thing. It's just been like, oh, I'm struggling with this, or I didn't know what about this, and you were like, okay, let's figure it out. But yeah, that's been such a huge benefit to me. And my parents are amazing too, but they've never worked in technology and they don't maybe understand the landscape. They're really encouraging and supportive, but it's great to get that breadth of support from those both within the sector and without. So I do think, definitely a responsibility now to do for the next lot.
Many years ago, someone gave me a really good tip, and I use it in my professional and personal life, is around who you have in your tent. And I think when you're perhaps a bit younger, you fill your tent with lots of people because that's kind of what you do, lots of friendships. You've probably got the space in your mind to do that. And then as you get older, you start to make that a bit narrower. And I think if you use that analogy in your work perspective, you put those people in your tent that you trust, that you know have your back, that are by your side, that will give you good feedback, positive feedback, but also sometimes giving you a direction that you didn't realize you needed. And that tent can be quite small and those people can be in there, but if they are trusted, then they will always be there for you. And then outside of that tent are the people that perhaps around the campfire, and they are colleagues that you have professional relationships with and you respect, but perhaps, it's more on a guarded perspective. It's to get the job done, but not necessarily who really understand who you are. And then you have people in the further field who perhaps aren't your people. It's okay to have that. It's okay to know that we don't always get on with everyone, and healthy friction is part of life. And I think if you do lots of reflection as you grow in your career and keep on using that tent analogy, it really helps in you grow as a person, because I think for me, your moral compass grows with you as you grow, but sometimes your values change as you progress into new roles and perhaps new stages of life. And it just allows you to just keep a check of who you are, who you want to be, and those people that are there to support you. And that is people. That's not gender specific. They are just good people. And Ajit and I obviously both have the CIO Eric, who both is amazing to both of us and supports us in different ways. And I think it's just about finding those right people and finding those people and keeping them close, and knowing also that it's a push and pull relationship. So as much as you may need to take from them, that you give back. And that's my tent analogy. Use it as you will, but
I love
it really works for me. There's a few people who are in the Portaloos, but we won't talk about those.
I mean, I love that analogy, and feel very honoured, privileged, because I'm assuming I'm in that tent of yours.
You are in my tent.
And not in the Portaloo. No, I think it's a really valid point, because I think the first step, I think, to solving any problem, challenge, I suppose, is just to accept that it's there. And I think building that support system is so important, isn't it? And Ruth, I know the sort of mentoring side of things of what you do, how close you hold that to your heart, and how important that is. And I know you've also been recognised, because you won an award last year. So I think it's great to see you being recognised for your contributions in the digital tech space as well. So I think that's so important as well.
I just think if, whether you're a people manager to the masses, or even if you're just a mentor or a coach, it's a privilege to have somebody come to you and ask you, for them to feel safe to say, actually, I've got this issue, whether that's something that they can't, navigate through, whether it's a situation that's arisen and it's completely wobbled them, but to know that someone will come to you and say, look, I trust you, and actually I feel safe to tell you this, and can you help me? that's a privilege, and we should never
Yeah.
ever underestimate that. And the one thing that keeps me motivated, I could do spreadsheets till the cows come home, and money and costings and all the challenges that come with my role, but the one that keeps me alive and keeps coming back for more is watching my team grow. And it's the biggest joy that I have. Sometimes it feels like whack-a-mole, just as I've solved one problem another one pops up.
Yeah.
But I feel really honoured that I'm entrusted with that position, because when you have a good leader, you'll never ever forget that good leader. And I can remember two that I've had in my career, one very in the early stages and one for a very, very short period of time. But the impact they had is long lasting. And that's also, I think we need to remember that words are really easy to say, but sometimes the impact can be quite long lasting. And so we need to think about that. We need to think about the power of what we do when we mentor and coach. But yeah, that's the biggest privilege that I have is leading my team, and also then having someone like Ajit who's coming new into our role and saying, look, I don't quite know how to navigate all this politics. Can you give me some hints and tips? But also then watching her become more resilient and more robust, but also trying things and finding her own way. That's really powerful for me.
I think it's that sort of feeling of giving something back as well, because like you say, we have all had those mentors that we remember, good leaders, and that sort of how that's made us feel, and how that's really sort of contributed to our growth. So I totally agree. I think that the importance behind mentoring, whether it be formal, informal, sometimes I think it's much more effective when it's less formal, but I think it's so important in terms of that development and giving those opportunities as well. Shall we just touch on, we've briefly talked about the benefits of just having that diverse, where it's particularly in these sectors where it is maybe seen to be more mathematical. Why is it so important that we have that diverse sort of approach in terms of those teams that we're building? Why is it so important to the business? We've talked about innovation and just having those different perspectives. When we're talking about technology, like you were saying in the banking industry, but equally for us here at Pluxee, having a diverse team that is looking at our product development, we're all users of product, and so it's so important that we've got that diverse sort of approach to that. What's so important to the business there in terms of having that diverse approach?
Because I think it's reflective of our customers, it's reflective of society. And I think when you kind of say the word diversity, people assume it means people of different cultures, different creeds, different genders, but actually it's diversity of thought and, all the backstories that come. And so when you have a room of people that have all got different disciplines and different ways of thinking, then we are reflective of our customer base, certainly from a banking perspective. The amount of times that we've developed products perhaps where we've been narrow and a bit isolated, and when we've delivered it into production and it's hit our customers and our customers have not behaved against it as we would have expected. So now, we bring them into the journey, and we do a lot of customer testing and research, because customer behavior and the way that customers react to things is so different than if you had a group who everyone thinks the same. And I take it back to friendship groups. You think of what makes good friendships is because we all bring something different to the table. If everyone was chaotic and forgot their purse all the time, you'd never have anyone paying for dinner. And then when you have someone who's maybe not so good at driving and the other one's really confident, and so it's pulling on skills and qualities that it's no different to you thinking about the ingredients in a cake. You need all of those ingredients to make that cake how you want it to be, and if you suddenly replace it with something else, it changes the dynamic of what that cake looks like. And so diversity of thought is key, whether you're working in Pluxee, whether you're Santander, whether you're a small startup business. We are all different, and I think it's finding then that common thread, that vision, that mission, that then allows us to hopefully go on and either develop or deliver, or whatever the end product is, that actually is what our customers and our businesses need.
Sometimes when you get that diversity of perspectives, you get a little bit of rub sometimes, which is so healthy. Like the innovation, the level of innovation you get after a bit of healthy debate, a bit of friction in a good way, it can only enhance it. It can't do it any damage. And that's the way that we should be going. So I think that good bit of rub is it adds.
It's so funny because healthy friction seems to be our new buzzword at the moment in Santander, which I think is a polite way of saying that people aren't agreeing on things. But I absolutely agree that as long as you come with the right mindset and the right behaviours, having difference of opinions is okay. It's then okay, you think that, I think that, what do we need to do to try and find some commonality? And that's what I think is really key. It has to come with the right intent, but that is where you find people are more innovative, is and my experience is often sometimes really senior leaders are so fearful of making that mistake of taking those risks that they can become quite dictatorial and a little bit kind of top to bottom. But actually that suffocates the organizations. I think you have to actually, a really good leader allows their teams to flow and actually celebrates the fact that if you tell them the kind of North Star, where you want them to get to, go and let them figure out how they get there. You put your postcode into your sat nav, it will give you 3 different options of 3 different routes, and you might choose the fastest, or you might choose the one that is going to have less roadworks, or whatever it might be. But even then, as you're driving, sometimes things happen where it has to deviate and take another path, but it always gets you to that end destination. And I think we need to start seeing the way that we work together in a similar fashion. And then as a leader, doing exactly that, giving them that postcode and then saying, right, you tell me how you're going to get there and how you're going to do it.
I'm going to remember these analogies.
I know, I'm queen of analogies today.
They are flying today. I don't think I've ever heard so many analogies come out of you. But no, I totally agree. I think it is what will give us that competitive edge as well. I think if we've got different perspectives, different way of thinking outside of the box, it's because those people have lived outside of the box. They've got different experiences, they've got different beliefs, values. I think it all brings that to the mix. So
I think you retain your workforce that way, because they always feel like they're changing and they're evolving. That's the one key thing that I think it's quite difficult to keep people growing and seeing career progression within one organization. And I think the more we do that, where we allow people to be innovative and creative, then it allows them to grow, but still within perhaps the broader team. And that's really powerful, because turnover of staff too often, too frequently, is quite challenging, and ultimately never leaves you in a stable state. But ultimately, we also need to have that pipe of bringing in fresh talent to make sure that we circulate round. And I think it's really fascinating to think of almost like taking a book back to the library. If Ajit does an amazing piece of work here with us at Santander for whatever period of time that is, but imagine if she then went and worked in another organisation, but that organisation then gave us someone back in kind of transfer, then suddenly you're doing that circulation around the same industry, but creating fresh talent all the time. Not that I want you to leave, by the way.
I wasn't gonna.
I thought there was another analogy coming in there when she started on about the library.
I'm going to stop now.
Before we go to questions, because I'm really conscious of time, and I know that we could probably chat all afternoon, but what would you tell your younger self in terms of the sort of path that you've taken?
Well, you are young, so what would you tell yourself 2 years ago? I've got to think back.
I think the thing is, a lot of the way that I've ended up developing and the mindset that I have now is because of the way I was when I was younger. Like I've told Ruth, I did so much sport when I was younger, and that really helps build such a strong mindset. The world of work, even that competitive element from sport, it does carry into it. The resilience and just building yourself up and then performing and going again. There's lots of things that are transferable. So I would probably just tell my younger self to keep going and just keep that thirst for learning. I do think if you don't have like a hunger to learn something new, you're going to be kind of in the same place for a while. So I think young people now, when I speak to them, I'm like, figure out what your passion is and just always want to learn more about it. And just keep going and the learning thing has got me to where I am now, so I'm just going to go with that.
Yeah.
I think there's two things probably. The first one is probably thank you to my younger self, because I think she made the brave decision to say to parents, I don't want to be a primary school teacher. And that back in the day was a big deal. And then I, applied for a role, what was Abbey National, not really knowing. So I suppose thank you, because perhaps she knew what I needed more than I knew myself. And then I think sorry for not believing in myself, because I think I've spent a lot of my life questioning who I am, because maybe I didn't fit, or maybe I didn't feel like I fitted in the arenas that I wanted to go in, some of the aesthetics perhaps, or the quirkiness, and so always feeling like I needed to be a shell of myself maybe to survive. And I've broken out of that now, and that might be, as I go into my next chapter of life, the naughty 40s and all of that, maybe I've broken down those barriers, but they certainly held me back for a little bit. So I think thank you to the really young me, and then I'm sorry for not believing in the other, and I won't ever make that mistake again, because actually who we are is our biggest selling point. And that doesn't mean you can't love, and it doesn't mean you can't grow, and it doesn't mean you can't evolve. But I think just believing in yourself, because you are going to be always your biggest fan, for sure.
Yeah.
Just keeping that authenticity whilst you do go through those journeys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, same for me. I think just in terms of being confident in who you are, I think that authenticity is definitely what kind of separates us, makes us different. So okay, shall we see if there's any questions? We've also got a short video. Slightly nervous about whether we can get the tech to work, but if let's perhaps take a question. I can see that someone's got their hand raised. Let's see if I can. Stella Harris.
Ajit will know.
Hello, coming.
Ajit knows I never miss an opportunity to ask a question. So firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge my stakeholder, Ruth. Hi, Ruth, and my amazing colleague, Ajit. And now I know, Ruth, you're responsible for bringing the amazing energy that is, Ruth is responsible for bringing Ajit to us, and I thank you without reserve. I really appreciate that. What I wanted to ask yourself, Ruth, as a leader within our organization, is you'll find that the term work-life balance and the questions around that are often attributed to us. We are asked, how are you managing work-life balance and the demands of being a mother and the demands of being a leader? Those questions don't seem to be asked to men. And I was reading something interesting that, a woman will go off on a maternity leave and be asked the question, how are you managing? And yet a man is an equal parent and is never asked the question. I wanted to find out what are your thoughts on that? And also, as someone you've mentioned as you were speaking, you've got a family. How do you manage those demands, and what advice would you offer to young women or old women like me in the field in managing the different hats that you carry throughout your career?
So a great couple of questions. Let me unpick it a little. I think, first of all, for me, it's life balance rather than work-life balance. For me, because work is part of my life, and I'm happy with that. It's a choice. So I always want to frame the way I do things is my life balance. I think I spent many years hiding the fact that I was a mum, because I felt like I was always the one, to your point, in a call going, I need to leave because I've got to pick up the kids, or they've got football camp, or whatever it might be. I'm feeling like the only person that would say that. So I'd often find other ways of, exiting out without referencing that I had my children. And how sad is that? Because they are my biggest blessing and also my biggest kind of priority. So I think I've kind of broken down that now, and I will shout about I need to leave. I think COVID has definitely helped because it's allowed everybody to find a different way to balance a working day. There's lots more flexibility of where you can take calls. You don't necessarily need to be in the office all the time. So I think that allows everybody to find, because for me, it's my children that are the people that I need to leave for, but others may be carers, or they may have a sport that they're actually really good at. And I think it's giving people the choices and also trusting them to make the right choice. If you know what your workload is, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, you manage it yourself. You should be trusted as a professional to be able to do that. And that might mean that you might need to take 4:30 to 5:30 out because you've got to do something, but it doesn't then mean that, for me, I quite like logging on once my kids are settled, because I find that I've had that break from work, the office has died down for the day, and I get on with the things that allow me to do that. So I think some of it's around our self-management of it, and also that internal bias where we feel like we're the only one saying it. I also then do think that we need a lot more people to step forward and say, I can't make that meeting at that time, but I can do this, this and this. Now, I referenced our boss, Eric. He actually lives in France. He's married, he's got 2 children, and he is very, very comfortable to say, I will join your call in the car because I'm doing the school run today. How refreshing is that? And that's, you know, someone who's very culturally different, because the Europeans work very differently to us, and sometimes an 8-9 o'clock meeting is quite normal in the evenings. But he's very comfortable with that. He says, I'm at home, my wife works, I'm taking the reins today. So I think it's not about whether men say it or women say it, it's just about people saying why they maybe can't do something and how they juggle it. I don't think the juggle will ever be gone, because you go from nursery where they're sick all the time, then they start school and they've got every club under the sun, and then you think, oh, they're off to university, but actually then there are even more problems, trust me, Stella. So I don't think there's ever a time where perhaps there isn't that juggle. It's about your management of that, and also prioritizing. So when I get a letter from school that says all these things where mums can go, dads can go, I sit down and work out what I believe is the right priority. I talk to my child, I then work it out, and I thread that into my diary. So, but they are non-negotiables for me. So if there's something that I've committed to, I make it happen. And I think we just need to be braver. And it is brave to say to whoever your leader is or a stakeholder, I can't make that session. I have a commitment that I can't move, and then maybe give them some other options. And I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel doing it. And actually, if you ever got any pushback on that, I would expect you to call it out. And that's what we've got to start doing. And I'm only talking about internally in Santander. It may be very different within Pluxee, but I do generally believe that some of it sits within our own management of it, being a bit braver, and also being honest and transparent, because most people will have things in their private lives that they are juggling, and it's not always around children. But yeah, I get the pressure and I get the pain, but I do think that we are moving away a little bit from that regimented 9 to 5. You need to be seen to be busy. I think there is a little bit now where there's a lot, certainly for me, trusting your team until you can't trust them. That's the way to do it, rather than this kind of, you need to earn my trust, and then I might let you have a half day because you've got to do something. You know, we're all professionals and we're responsible, and we should understand what we need to do to get the job done.
Thank you very much, Ruth.
I think the balance changes as well sometimes. I'm not sure we'll ever get that right, will we, in
No.
terms of because it is changing. Sometimes that balance is more sort of work related. Sometimes there are priorities at home that need to take priority. But yeah, I think it is about having those open and honest conversations as well, isn't it? Because it isn't just women that are, experiencing those challenges around juggling it, albeit it might be that we're talking about it a little bit more.
Yeah,
so I think, again,
absolutely.
just sort of, yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, anybody wants to raise? Danny?
I'll turn my mic off, that'll help. Hi. So I was just wondering, because often, the divide does come at the point of having children, doesn't it, between women and men in their careers, and certainly from a pay perspective. And very often that is a result of the gender pay gap itself. You know, there's a fiscal reason why women, and a policy reason why women take maternity over men at that stage, and it kind of creates that rhetoric that, you know, we are the primary caregivers over men. Just interested, I suppose, from Santander's perspective, you know, are there any initiatives, or is there anything that you're doing in that particular space really to try and encourage, maybe more of a share of that particular load?
Yeah, we've recently evolved our policy, not maybe quite mapping obviously how long a female can take off versus obviously paternity, but certainly allowing a bit more flexibility. I mean, I think Europe have got it right, certainly some of the Scandi countries where they can very much dual run. But for me, it's about also personal choice, because actually if my husband had had the opportunity to take 6-9 weeks off when I'd had my babies, that would have been no use to me. We were both dishevelled, the kids were a pain. But actually imagine having it now where maybe they need you a bit more. My daughter's at university, and sometimes it would be nice to know that we could take some time to have settled her in, or, you know. So I think it's about having flexibility across the duration of what the kind of key parenting timeline is. When they start school, wouldn't it be amazing if you could say to a parent, look, you can take some time off now to settle them in, or to be there at the school gates to pick them up. So I don't think we do enough holistically in that space. We've tried to make sure that we are flexible at local level. So if someone wants to take, I think it's 6-7 weeks that a gentleman now gets to take off. They don't need to take it in a bulk. They can spread it across, which I think is a really nice way to do that. But we've just started to run what we call our Women in STEM programme, and there's 60 amazing women that are on the programme, and I'm very blessed to be one of the sponsors. One of the key themes that have come out is that people feel it holds their career back, that they take the decision to go off and have a family, they take whatever time out that they've made that right decision for, and then they're playing catch up. And that's what we've got to make sure, because trust me, when I watch some of those women at work who are multitasking, a baby at nursery, 15 different bags, then coming into the office and absolutely bossing their job, they're sometimes stronger at multitasking than a male equivalent. But what we do is we hold them back because we want them to prove that they can do it, or we think, oh, they're part-time, so can't really get the really interesting stuff because they're leaving at 3 o'clock. It's a mindset shift, it's also a behavioural shift, and it's a leadership shift. And the power comes from having better leaders in those positions that, again, say, no, that's not okay. And that comes from that demonstration that Nicole's talking about, is knowing that actually I am that leader. Stella's asking that question because she's clearly seeing, I've got children. Oh, you're like me. You're having that juggle. Yeah. Okay, what did you do? How did you get through those hurdles? So the more we talk about it and the more we give different ideas and different ways to kind of shape it, then we'll start to see some of those changes. And the policies often fall quite quickly behind, don't they?
I've seen it where you've dropped like a message in a meeting to say, oh, sorry, I've got the dreaded call from school, or, you've got to, you've made it quite clear that, okay, I've got to be somewhere else right now. And that braveness that you've shown, it is so contagious, because there's other people on that call that probably would have been way too nervous or even scared to, be so honest.
I just don't know how you can hide that part of who you are. No, like, it's the biggest part of who I am. Yeah. And I had a lady who works in the business, really, really senior in the business, is married to a female and has got children. And until last year, no one knew that. And it was only when she had an executive coach, and I'm talking, she's really senior. The executive coach says, you are hiding part of who you are. And she didn't realise it until it was said. And then all of a sudden, she brought her whole self to the workplace. I don't know how you can't do that, because if you're like me, I go home and my husband knows the name of everyone I work with, all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, so you take your work home and you talk about it really freely. But we feel like when we go into the workplace that we have to hide what, for me, is the absolutely core part of who we are, which is what our family setup looks like, or what we do in our personal life. So I don't think we should hide away from it. And that doesn't mean that forever, if I was constantly saying, I can't make that meeting, I can't make that meeting, I can't make that meeting, that's not balance either. Yeah. It's just about acknowledging that life moments happen, and when they hit, you need people to support you in those life moments. You need people to say, it's okay, I've got your back. go and do what you need to do, and when you need to come back, you come back, whatever that looks like, whether that's a 5-minute phone call or you've got to go and sit and watch your child sing in a choir really badly, which is normally what I get given. But the look on their faces when you are there makes me always remind myself that it is the priority, because there's no feeling like it when they give you, you know, that look that you've given them that time. So yeah, I think it's just about balance, but I also think it's about bringing your whole self to the workplace.
Yeah, so important. I think we've probably come to the end of the time that we've got available. That the last hour has flown by. So I know it's a topic that's close to all of our hearts, and hopefully we've given today some food for thought. I think it's fair to say that there's still a way to go, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that some of the initiatives have gone some way to bridge that gap. There's still a long way to go, but I think we can, together we can make that happen. Huge thank you to Ruth and Ajit. It has been such a joy to talk to you both. Thank you for sharing so openly and honestly your experiences. Some of that thought-provoking discussion today. Really, really appreciate you giving up your time to be part of that.
I mean, Nicole, just as something that we might maybe want to follow up with, I know obviously most of you are local to Milton Keynes, but Unity Place is an open working space. The ground floor is open to the public. There's work cafe, there's coffee shops. If anyone ever wants to, perhaps come over here and we could arrange something where actually we can connect as females from different industries, that would be maybe an amazing thing to do. Just have a coffee and have a chat and just more connections, then you would be more than welcome.
I would love to organise that with you. We are all on LinkedIn, so very, very delighted to hear from anybody if there's any follow-up discussions, conversations. But I would definitely take you up on that offer, Ruth. Let's
There's a bar as well.
We can organise something. Well, I'm there. I will end there. We have got some more exciting guest topics lined up over the course of the next couple of weeks, months. If you want to reach out to any of us, please do so. If not, I will thank you all for joining us and wish you a really great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.